Voters such as those could help hand Ted Cruz either a critical upset win or perhaps deliver Donald Trump yet another victory on what would seem more and more an inevitable road to the nomination. 57 delegates are up for grabs on the Republican side of things, and recent polls show that Donald Trump is now poised to take many, if not all of them. That would keep him on track then to reach the magic number of 1237 needed to clinch the nomination on a first ballot in Cleveland come July. To discuss it all and a whole lot more, Trump campaign national spokesperson Katrina Pierson joins us from Dallas. Katrina, we appreciate the time this morning. I mentioned the polls in these past few days. They suggested a week ago perhaps your candidate up by 6-7 points. Now we see Donald Trump up by as many as 15 points in some. Does the campaign at this point expect that sort of win?
Yes, Josh, we do. We're very confident that we're going to win Indiana tonight and win handily. Mr. Trump is very excited. He has spent a lot of time there and getting to know some of these voters, speaking to them one-on-one, holding massive rallies, which I'm sure many of your viewers have already seen. And it's his vision of making America great again and putting it first is what's winning. We
watched yesterday as Ted Cruz, in fact, at a campaign stop of his, actually walked out to meet a group of supporters of your candidate outside the event. What did you think of the exchange?
Well, I'm not quite sure what the logic was. I mean, most polls show that Mr. Trump supporters are locked in at 80 and even 90% in some cases. But I think this was your Harvard lawyer, superb debater instinct in him, trying to convince a Trump supporter. But unfortunately, he came across as insulting the Trump voter. Prior to that, he had said that we were evil and Trump voters were evil. So these are just desperate attempts for the Cruz campaign to try to salvage whatever's left of it. I
want to ask you as well about some comments that your candidate made this morning with Fox discussing the father of Ted Cruz, Rafael Cruz. Take a listen.
I exhort every member of the body of Christ to vote according to the Word of God and vote for the candidate that stands on the Word of God and on the Constitution of the United States of America. And I am convinced that man is my son, Ted Cruz. The alternative could be the destruction of America.
Does that resonate with the folks there in Indiana?
I think it's a disgrace that he's allowed to do it. I think it's a disgrace that he's allowed to say it. I'm backed by you look at Jerry Falwell Jr., and you look at so many of the ministers that are backing me, and they're backing me more so than they're backing Cruz. And I'm winning the evangelical vote. And it's disgraceful that his father can go out and do that. And so many people are angry about it. And the evangelicals are angry about it, the way he does that. And, there's a whole thing. And his father was with Lee Harvey Oswald prior to Oswald's being shot. I mean, the whole thing is ridiculous. What is this right prior to his being shot? And nobody even brings it up. I mean, they don't even talk about that. That was reported, and nobody talks about it. But I think it's horrible. I think it's absolutely horrible that a man can go and do that, what he's saying there.
Right. There was a picture out there that reportedly shows Rafael Cruz standing with Lee Harvey Oswald.
I mean, what was he doing with Lee Harvey Oswald shortly before the death, before the shooting? It's horrible.
Katrina, what is Donald Trump suggesting when he mentions that?
Well, I think what he's talking about there with that reference, first with regards to the statements that Senator Cruz's father had made, were right along the lines of some previous statements of Glenn Beck saying that Ted Cruz was anointed to deliver America and the destruction of the earth is coming if you don't vote for Ted Cruz. But then the Miami Herald also covered what Mr. Trump was talking about, something having to do with Lee Harvey Oswald. And so the whole thing just seems quite strange, and that's what he was referencing.
But specifically to tying the father of Ted Cruz to Lee Harvey Oswald, again, what specific strategy does that speak to?
Well, again, you'd have to actually go to the author of the article at the Miami Herald to find out what that was about. But it was the strangeness of the characterizations. And that's what Mr. Trump was talking about. The whole thing was just extremely strange.
We have heard increasing numbers of references, meanwhile, to Hillary Clinton from Donald Trump as both candidates perhaps now look to pivot to a general election. Both would do so with historically high, unfavorable ratings. What is the Trump campaign going to do to reverse these staggering numbers?
Well, Mr. Trump is going to stick with his message of making America great again, with his vision of putting America and American families first in all areas of government, particularly foreign policy and the economy. He has talked about bringing jobs back to this country through trade and changing the taxation. And this is what's different between Donald Trump and Hillary Clinton. Hillary Clinton has been talking about these same issues for 40 years. Her husband was president for 2 terms. She served as Secretary of State just as the Middle East fell apart. So she really doesn't have a goal and purpose to talk about, because she's still talking about the problems after Democrats have been in control, and for the first part of the Obama administration had full control over the government. So they're still complaining that things are wrong. And Mr. Trump has a very different approach and a very different vision for the country, which means there'll be a wonderful contrast in November.
So again, the historically low favorability numbers that we see amongst feelings about the GOP of likely voters, 66%, it's the highest all time since the question was first asked in 1984. A negative 38 net favorability rating. That will all come about by just contrasting his views with those of Hillary Clinton's.
Well, I do, simply because if you look at where Mr. Trump started in the Republican primary by itself, he also had extremely high unfavorables, particularly with women. That gap was closed in about 3 months once he took his message to the people and started interacting with the individuals on the ground. And I think we're going to see the same thing happen in the general.
Meanwhile, Ted Cruz, no matter how Donald Trump feels about him, is still polling second. It is still his main rival in this primary season. Would he welcome, if Ted Cruz were to lose and perhaps leave the race, would he welcome Senator Cruz's endorsement?
Oh, sure. Mr. Trump will welcome anyone's endorsement. This has been a highly...
Even someone he's called Lion Ted.
Well, sure, absolutely. He's welcomed the previous endorsements that he's had when he had criticism with Governor Chris Christie or even Ben Carson, for that matter. Of course, he would welcome the endorsement of Senator Ted Cruz. He does want to unite the party, but at the same time, he's still facing 55,000 attack ads against him, so he's going to continue to respond in kind.
I'm going to get you out of here on this one. If, again, Donald Trump wins, as the polls suggest he will today, and takes another step towards a nomination, when might we see a vice presidential announcement?
After the nomination has been locked up, Mr. Trump will make that announcement.
Right. Trump campaign national spokesperson Katrina Pierson, we appreciate the time.
Thanks, Josh. Great to see you.